morning and welcome to the final day of Veterans Advanced Energy Week. Congratulations to those of you who have stuck it out with us for 4 days, and welcome to anyone who is just tuning in today. I am Margaret Jackson, the Deputy Director for Climate and Advanced Energy in the Global Energy Center at Atlantic Council. I recently joined the council after moving back from Japan, where my husband was stationed as a naval aviator. While we were in Asia, I was building on the climate and energy policy work that I started in grad school with the help of a number of focused research grants. Before that, I was on active duty, and so in many ways, taking this job, I finally completed the full transition to civilian life. I was formerly a surface warfare officer in the Navy, and I did 2 tours in the Western Pacific. I actually started as an electrical officer on my first destroyer, and I never imagined that I would be drawing on those engineering skills now. I posted a picture today in the virtual cafe, and I hope you will check it out and share your own background story with us. I wanted to share a little bit about my story just to say that I understand how hard the transition can be at any phase of your career, but I think you're doing the right thing by being here, educating yourself, and building your network. The veteran community and people like Dan Mish, who is the co-director of this project, are the reason that I'm here today. The Global Energy Center and Atlantic Council teams have worked tirelessly to make this event possible. So please extend them a big thank you if you have the chance to connect with them. I have been blown away by their efforts over the last few weeks and their dedication to the goal of matching veterans with jobs in clean energy. Atlantic Council has taken on this project and is here to serve you today because the mission of the organization is to shape the global future together and promote US leadership around the world. The US can only be a leader, especially in fields like energy and climate, if we do the hard work to improve our competitiveness and overcome the politicization of important issues like climate change and clean energy. I want to remind you that your service to our country does not end when you take off your uniform. Your work does not end. In my opinion, it really just begins. And your job is to take the tools you learned while in service and apply them in a new way to benefit your next organization you join. In doing that, you will still be working for a secure future of our nation. Yesterday's topics focused on technology trends that are poised to shape our future. We had our senior fellow Jennifer Gordon lead a discussion on advanced nuclear, a panel sponsored by Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance on energy efficiency and digitization, and we wrapped up the conversation yesterday with a focus on the future of the electric grid. Today's focus is on you, our veterans. Following these opening remarks, we will have a panel led by Michael Baskin, featuring US military veterans who will discuss how to leverage veterans' resources in the workplace. Our second panel this afternoon brings together a diverse group of veteran CEOs and entrepreneurs working across the energy field, and that is sponsored by the Truman National Security Project. Finally, we will end today's programming and close out Veterans Advanced Energy Week with remarks by Vice Admiral Dennis McGinn. And I'm excited to share that we will stream a special message from former Mayor Pete Buttigieg. We are glad you can join us today. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Michael Baskin. Thank you.
All right, good morning and welcome to Leveraging Veteran Affinity Groups. Hello, and thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world for this session on the final day of Veterans Advanced Energy Week. I've enjoyed the last couple of days of policy conversations, networking events, and film screenings. I'm looking forward to diving into today. We're on the veteran perspective. If you weren't able to tune in, you can check out all conference content on the conference app or on the Atlantic Council YouTube channel. Again, my name is Michael Baskin. I'm an innovation advisor with the Center for Advanced Energy Studies at Idaho National Lab. It's a consortium with Boise State, University of Idaho, Idaho State University, and the University of Wyoming. I'll be the moderator for this session. I'm pleased to be joined by a diverse and experienced panel of veterans doing great things across the energy spectrum. And we're going to talk about how to leverage veterans, employee resource groups in the workplace and beyond. So before we get started, a couple more housekeeping notes. This event is on the record, and we are currently live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I encourage you to post about what you hear today and share on social media using hashtag Vets in Energy, and by tagging us at AC Global Energy and Vets_Energy. If you'd like to participate in the conversation, we encourage you to submit the questions in the Q&A portal located at the bottom of your screen at any time during the event. And I will note that with the experience on the panel, ask your question. This is the time to do it. And we'll incorporate those questions into the responses. And please note, however, only those directly engaging via the Advanced Energy Veterans Advanced Energy app will be able to submit questions. All right, so let's get into the panel. So I'm going to introduce everyone briefly, and then we'll go around and hear from them. So members of the panel include, and it is my pleasure to introduce Matt Kellam, Military and Recruitment Program Coordinator at Dominion Energy. Would also like to welcome Justin Lyle, Corporate Strategic Planner and Chair of the Veterans Employee Resource Group at Emerson. Would like to welcome Jennifer Manfre, Principal Manager of External Engagement at Southern California Edison. And would like to welcome Brad Purtell, Director of Services and Business Development at Invenergy. So briefly, we're going to go around the horn, and I'd like to welcome the panelists to share a little bit about their company they work in, their personal background, their individual role in the company, and their role in the Veterans Employee Resource Group. And we'll try to go around with about 2 minutes each. Matt, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. My name again is Matt Kellam. I'm the Military and Recruitment Program Coordinator for Dominion Energy. Dominion Energy is headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, which is where I sit. We have a footprint across 20 states with 19,000 employees, 14% of which have identified as being veterans, and 1 in 5 of our hires for almost the past decade have been veterans. So generally speaking, I'm very proud of all the things that our company's doing. A little bit more about myself. I was in the Marine Reserves from 1994 to 2000 while I was going to college. I did amphibious assault. So I was stationed down at Little Creek Naval Base in Norfolk, Virginia. I was very fortunate. My time in the service was essentially peacetime, but I've found in my 20 plus year career on the civilian side, all in talent acquisition and workforce development, that I've been able to give back to military and veterans. And one of the ways that I'm able to do that, even beyond my day job at Dominion Energy, is through Dominion Energy's Veterans Resource Group, as we call it. I serve as not only a member, but also an advisor to that group. And I'll just point out, and I'm sure we'll tease it out later in the discussion, but our Veterans Resource Group focuses on 3 main areas: business, which looks externally, and figures out ways that we can maybe recruit more veterans to the company, allow interaction with our veteran employees. Of course, we look internally at employees for professional development. How can we help our fellow veteran and military spouse employees? And then, of course, community engagement. So I'll pause there and turn it to the next panelist.
Awesome. Justin, if we can take you off mute. There you go, brother.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Justin Lyle. So as Mike mentioned, I'm a corporate strategic planner at Emerson Electric. I am based in St. Louis, which is where our corporate headquarters is. But we have operations all across the world and all across the country. So a very diverse and distributed business. Emerson as a whole, as a company, we operate under 2 different platforms. We have about 80,000 employees globally, but we operate under 2 different platforms. And I like to reference it as we have the energy topics around it, because we both work on the power generation side, so the energy production side, but then also we work on the energy consumption side with a very large HVAC business. So the automation solution side is basically a range of technologies around valves, sensors, control systems, and software that we sell into oil and gas companies, but also to operate power plants of all types: renewable energy, nuclear, oil and gas, and biofuels. And actually, roughly 60% of the US's electricity generation is controlled by our technology. So we have a whole range of suite of technology on the power generation side, but then also on the commercial and residential side, we operate on the efficiency side with HVAC. So we have a very large vested interest in what's going on in the energy space. To introduce myself, my background is actually Air Force. So I was active duty Air Force for just over 7 years. I flew as a pilot in the E-3 AWACS, and I was stationed at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City primarily. I did a couple of forward deployments to the Middle East, and that totaled for about a year. But then while I was studying there, or while I was deployed there, ended up studying power generation, got kind of interested in the subject, And then by the time I made my transition out of the military, found my way to GE Aviation actually for a few years before coming to Emerson just a couple of years ago. I also started the Veterans Resource Group at Emerson 2 years ago within the company, and I've helped grow it. And now we have around 7 chapters and 300 members in our group. And very similar to what Matt said, we're focused both on the transition issue and helping veterans get the mentorship and the experience that they need to make a successful transition, the professional development inside the company, but then also try to create and bridge the cultural gaps between maybe people that have served and that haven't served through cultural events and community service. And to us, that bridging that gap is very important to us.
Awesome, welcome. And now I think we'll go to Southern California. Jennifer.
Hi, and thank you, Mike, for herding us cats, getting us all together for this, and of course, thank you to the Atlantic Council Veterans Initiatives for this conference. I think it's fantastic. The kind of thing that I wish I had known about a while back, so that I could have this expansive knowledge and explore careers. So I work for Southern California Edison, which is under the parent company of Edison International. We are the utility, kind of what you would think of as your electric company. We service in a territory that's about the size of South Korea, and we have about 13,000 employees. 6% of those are veterans, and 7% of our executive force is veterans. So, so even more to the executive level, which is a great testament to the leadership here. My own story, I was in the Army, military police officer. I transitioned into the reserves and to a civil affairs officer, and then spent a lot of time on active duty as a reservist in civil affairs. And that, I think, is what my career transition really helped me with, because I actually do very similar work now as my civil affairs work. So I work in clean energy policy specifically. Southern California Edison is very committed to reducing greenhouse gases. We are currently at 50% clean energy. So, so we are definitely making strides and still increasing there. And so, so what I do is I manage external engagement on clean energy policy, which means that I advocate. I basically win the hearts and minds, just like I did in civil affairs when I was in the Army. So a nice transition there. But I'll tell you, and I think we're going to get into it later, it's not easy. It's a long path. At Edison, we do have an employee resource group for veterans. It's called Valor. I'm an advisor there. We use it as a leadership tool. So because I'm a manager, we kind of allow our individual contributors to take leadership roles there. So I'm going to give a shout out to Jeff Rodriguez, who's an awesome leader of our Valor employee resource group. And we do much the same that everyone's talked about already. We do community service, we help with recruiting, and we definitely create a culture that supports and teaches Edison about how to be valuable to veterans.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. And let's go, I believe, to the Midwest, to Brad.
Right. I'm in Chicago, so that is definitely the middle of the Midwest. Thanks, Mike. And as Mike alluded, I'm Brad Purtell with Invenergy and Invenergy Services. Happy to be here. A little bit about my story. I went to college at Purdue for business for a couple of years. Right after that, I joined the Navy for a few reasons. Firstly, I ran out of money for school, and the Navy was going to help with that. Secondly, I wanted to travel, and I definitely got to do that being out in Pearl Harbor. But I also wanted to be part of something and really make a difference. I just wasn't getting that sense of collaboration and purpose attending school as I was growing up through youth sports. I went through the Naval Nuclear Power Training Program, enlisted as an electrician's mate, and was fortunate enough to get my first choice of Pearl Harbor after my time in Charleston, South Carolina. I spent nearly 4 years on the fast attack submarine USS La Jolla, and got on multiple deployments in the Pacific on the western side and the eastern side of the Pacific. As I was getting closer to transitioning out of the military, I considered making the easy transition into nuclear power In the civilian sector, companies like Exelon kept popping up since I was looking for places near my hometown in Chicago. Ended up getting a call from a smaller renewable energy company called Invenergy, and was curious about, because they were just starting up a control center in the west suburbs of Chicago. So coming from a monitoring a nuclear reactor plant, steam plant, electric plant on the submarine, I thought, well, I could do that. And it's a change from what I had been doing. So on my last day of terminal leave with the military, I started my first day in the Invenergy Control Center, monitoring and controlling wind turbines. Since then, I've held various positions within Invenergy, like program development, engineering, control center management, cyber and physical security and compliance, and now business development for Invenergy's third-party services business. So I co-founded and still co-chair the Invenergy Veterans Network, and very similar to the other organizations, have commitments on and mounted on 3 pillars of recruitment, employee engagement, and community outreach, which I think we'll get into a little bit further on. Looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome, thank you. And so I'll just add for myself, I'm a former Army infantry officer, long tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. GI Bill, was able to pursue, I was interested in energy, but was able to pursue a master's degree and then later a PhD. Worked as a fellow in the Department of Energy, catalyzed a program called Solar Ready Vets, a veterans internship called, for FEMP, and worked for the First Lady's Joining Forces initiative on an energy sector commitment to hire veterans, and revitalized kind of our veterans employee resource group by getting coffee together. I now work for, and I taught for the Marines for a year, and now I'm supporting Idaho National Lab. So we've got a little bit about everybody, but let's just briefly for a minute go to the macro. So about 20 million veterans in the US. However, half of them are older than 65 and are not really part of the workforce. And that's because the military was larger in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And that's why the population is skewed. Around 200,000 veterans get out of the military every year. It used to be higher. It used to be around 250,000 when the military was drawing down, or at least the Army. And it may be as low as 160,000 a year, but that's about who gets out of the military every year. Of that population, it's a little bit skewed, obviously, to the 21 to 26-year-old demographic. And then there are obviously people in their late 20s, 30s, and 40s transitioning from the military who are going into energy careers. So just wanted to kind of highlight the macro as we dive in. But with the panelists, I kind of want to hit something here. What was the key point? Was there a key point that you knew you were interested in energy, whether it was in the military or after you got out? What was kind of that key point where you said, I'm going to go after an energy opportunity?
So, Mike, this is Matt. I'll go first. I think I have probably one of the more unique pathways. I'm actually the 4th generation of my family to work for Dominion Energy, or whatever it's been called in our 100+ year history. So, while I was in the reserves and going to school, I'll be honest, I think the perspective that I can offer is I was that student veteran that really didn't know what he wanted to do. And frankly, I'm not embarrassed to say that I dropped out of college because I wanted to go and work and, learn and apply at the time. So really, I fell into third-party staffing. And it was towards the latter half of my time with the company that I worked for, that I was able to, for 3 years, provide direct support to one of the utility companies in the Northeast as their sole staffing provider. And in that function, and I also served as a military program coordinator for that company. But in that function, I was more intimately introduced to the energy industry. I could plainly see, the projects they were working on, all the types of positions that they needed. It's not just line workers or, power station employees and engineers. There's a lot more to it. So anyway, I moved back home to Richmond, Virginia from the Northeast, and knowing that I wanted to make a career move out of third-party staffing, I really specifically targeted in my area Dominion Energy. And again, I knew it from my family history. And frankly, for the last 12 and a half years, the rest is history. So again, I had a little bit of a unique perspective. And I think that's part of what adds value to what I'm able to do in my current role is I have not only the appreciation of the traditional service member separating or even the spouse and what they're going through, but also the student veteran and the person that's in the Guard or Reserve. So I'll pause there, but I think that might offer some unique perspective.
Yeah, and Mike, I can go next to talk about how I got interested in energy. And I would say it wasn't just one necessarily aha moment, but I think it was a couple of factors that came together at a certain point in time that sparked my interest. And I would say one of them was when I was actually doing a master's in engineering. I was still in the Air Force active duty, so I was doing this master's degree in correspondence while I was deployed. So we would download the lectures and we'd watch them. And to an extent, because of the flexibility of the program, I was able to choose which classes I wanted to learn about. So anything from control systems to spectral imaging to power generation and distribution. But one thing that kind of influenced my decision to focus on the power generation and distribution side of the equation was the fact that when you look around in the military, and maybe it starts when you're in basic training, but they take away everything from you. So you don't have cell phones, you don't have watches, you don't have any sort of electronic devices. You start to understand what life is like without electricity or any of the amenities that society provides. And at that point when I was trying to decide what classes I wanted to take, I just thought it was really interesting because there's this kind of invisible force all around us that we take for granted. When I hit the light switch, the light turns on. When I turn on the AC, the room temperature comes down. And we just kind of take that for granted. But I wanted to understand what the technology was and the infrastructure required to make all of that possible, because there is a lot of technology that goes into making some of these things we take for granted possible. And so that's what influenced my decision to take some of these classes around power generation, but then also learn a little bit about smart grid and the future of how energy will get distributed. Anyways, my personal story, it was, like I said, it was kind of a confluence of multiple factors that came together.
Awesome. And I still remember from my time in the military, there was this party called that always did something. So I laughed when they came back. Awesome. So Jennifer, maybe is there a certain time that you became really interested in energy, or was it a gradual path? Jennifer, we'd love to hear you. We see you talking. There we go. We take you off mute.
There we go. Thanks. So mine was more of a gradual path, I will say, and I'm going to share Matt's experience. Getting out of the military, I really had no idea. Like, I had no idea what I wanted to do, where to go. I was while I was on active duty, I completed my master's degree in public administration, but still really didn't. And when I did transition, like I said, I was in the reserves, but activated. When I did actually transition into civilian life, I was coming out of the activation from Sarajevo, and I'd spent a year in Sarajevo. And so I'm coming back to the United States, having been gone for a long time, and I really didn't know what I want to do. And I did a transition plan that included an organization called CORO, and it was a public affairs, CORO Southern California. They have programs in St. Louis and in New York and in San Francisco. So they are throughout the United States, but it really allowed me to look at a broad, a lot of sectors: government, nonprofit, and private sector, labor. We got to look at the whole things and how these kind of organizations kind of interacted. And it was there that I really decided that I still needed mission in my life. Really needed to be doing something that was very real. And I had an opportunity to explore a lot of sectors. And so I had determined that it needed to either be in three of the messiest and changingest and deepest, most like hard, crunchy problems that I felt our country had: education, health, or energy. And so those were the three ones that I kind of targeted. And then I did some, when you're really, you have to be humble when you're looking for a job, for your first job, because people don't understand your background and all that. So I went and I built my skills in kind of public affairs, public relations, media relations, stakeholder engagement, and I built up those skills. And then finally, like, the opportunity happened, and I came to Southern California Edison. I started as leading the media relations and the social media team, all skills that I had garnered in the 10 years since I had left. the military. And that's really what it goes. And I got to tell you, I'm hooked. I'm really hooked. This is a real world mission. We provide electric service, which is an essential service, particularly in this time of pandemic. Even when the country was, when our communities were shut down and people couldn't leave, they needed electricity. Hospitals need electricity. Grocery stores needed electricity. We had a real world mission. And I will say, I still get that charge. I know now I have like a desk job, and I do this like stakeholder stuff, and I'm doing like the hearts and minds kind of stuff, but I still do also have a real job. In fact, last week I was doing 15-hour shifts at a virtual emergency operations center because we have wildfires. And when there are wildfires, I am on duty, I am on call, and I am called up to serve an emergency operations center. It is real world, and that is what attracts me to energy, and I love it.
Awesome. So a 10-year journey, education, health, or energy, all good fields. Energy obviously growing, opportunities growing, and the mission though. So big mission kind of pulled you in. Let's go to Brad. We see a Navy nuclear submarine in the background with Brad. So maybe we'll learn about how you got involved in energy. But I think, so explain to us how a Navy nuke gets involved in energy.
Yeah, honestly, I was at college before the Navy for business. And if you were to ask me about energy or electrical fundamentals at that point, I would have shown myself the door. P&N junctions, reactor physics, thermodynamics, come on. Actually, even going through A school as an electrician's mate, and then nuclear power school, I thought it was about learning new things. I enjoyed learning new things, not necessarily energy, but as I learned more about the different energy sources, or the different sources of energy, finishing up my nuclear engineering degree, which very similar to everybody else, was paid through tuition assistance while I was in. I believe that was when I started truly getting into how energy played such a critical role in our everyday lives. Very much like, I feel most people don't understand how critical it actually is. Jennifer and Justin laid that out very well. They expect that when they go to the wall, the light switch turns the light on. When they plug their phone into the wall, that it actually charges. All the while not having to pay an arm and a leg for that load consumption. So there's a whole business around energy, and that I think is what really attracted me to energy after finishing that first degree.
Awesome, and I'll just confess, whenever a new Navy nuke, talks about what they do, this former Army brain gets a little heavy. I'll just add, just because I wanted to share it briefly, I got interested in Afghanistan as a rifle company executive officer. In 2004, we were at a company fob at 6,000 feet. I had 2 weeks of leave. We had, 30,000 gallons. We had like 40 days worth of fuel. And make a long story short, I came back 2 weeks later and they were black on fuel, and our consumption had like quadrupled very rapidly. And I went out to the fob, and I found my soldiers were sleeping in their underwear in 10-degree weather because they didn't know how to change the heat in the, basically very, non-thermally equipped tent. And we had one generator per tent. And so, our consumption got up 400%. I was just astonished and intrigued of like, how could we not, what is going on here? Which got me interested in energy efficiency and demand response. But soldiers in their underwear in 10-degree weather because they didn't know how to turn down the heat. So I'm big on the human component. All right, so we have a lot of experience here. We got 4 folks who got experience plus their involvement in their veterans affinity groups and their veterans employee resource groups. So let's dive in there. What can we say to those looking to start a veterans affinity group? But actually, let's go back. What is a veterans employee resource group? Let's unpack what they look like and go around the horn a little bit. And Matt, you want to start us off?
Nope, go ahead.
Sure. Generally speaking, and others may articulate it differently, but for us, an employee resource group is an opportunity for individuals, not necessarily described by the title of the group. So, for example, our veterans resource group welcomes all employees, as do the other 8 employee resource groups that our company has. Anyone's welcome to join. But basically, again, we focus on those business, employee, and community areas so that we can help the business and impact the goals and objectives of our company. And then each group can maybe do that for a particular community or what have you. So just roughly speaking, that is the intent as we approach it of a resource group. As far as maybe how to start the resource group, one of the things I've observed over the past 6+ years is sometimes, well, first of all, you have to have interested individuals, and that group may be small, may be big, but typically you can just grab a hold of whoever's around you. And Justin, I think you said you helped start yours. I can't take that credit, but I was an early participant in helping shape how we approached ours. So start with whoever's got a sincere and genuine interest around you. And then the other thing that I've observed is a lot of times it might start with your community engagement. Many of our industry companies, as others have talked about on the panel, we're service oriented. We want to do things that allow us to align with the mission, to give back to our communities. All of those things we have in common. And so I would be willing to bet that a lot of us or our companies are already doing things in the community. Therefore, we're probably already aligned with some sort of veteran service organization. And even if you just start in those couple places, those are great starting points. And then what you find is as you spread the word internally, externally, however, it will grow exponentially. We actually have over 400 employees across our footprint that are part of our Veterans Resource Group. And then we also have, I think, 4 total formal chapters, but we've got 2 others that are budding in other areas where there's that genuine interest. So I would start there. Again, you could maybe give some similar examples, Justin. I think you alluded to, wanting to teach and train and develop on culture and employee development. You may have strengths in those areas. And again, wherever you're already doing things, those might be just good places to start. I'll turn it over from there.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think there's multiple benefits and reasons why veterans resource groups exists in companies. One of the more practical sides of it I'll talk about too is that every company out here needs talent management. They need sources of talent, right? At least in our company, we're facing a challenge because as 5 to 10 to 20 years from now, we're going to have a whole wave of baby boomers that start retiring. And so we're looking at filling our talent pipeline with talent in general. And if you have 200 very highly qualified, educated, and diverse people that are ready to work coming out into the workforce every year, it would almost be foolish not to take advantage of that. So for us, there's an element of talent to it. But then also on the other side, I would say that one of the very important parts, I think, in helping veterans transition is helping bridge the understanding gap between those that may not have served and may not understand those perspectives and the experience that they bring, and those that do serve, right? And I think it goes both ways because I think there's a group of people in our company that are trying to understand what military service is like and how to connect with veterans. And then there's a whole other side of veterans that are transitioning out, trying to understand how do they connect with hiring managers in the corporate sense. So to us, the Veterans Resource Group is about bridging that gap through cultural events, providing a forum where people are safe to ask questions and share their experiences, because sometimes those that haven't served are cautious around what kind of questions they can ask a veteran because they're not sure what experiences they may have or may not have been through. And then, obviously there's questions on the other side as well. So we provide a forum to meld and bridge those two cultural perspectives. So that way, our hiring manager, next time they talk to a veteran, they have something to relate to them with, and vice versa. So that's really how we view it in our company.
Awesome. So a talent pipeline, but also a component to connect internally, and then for folks who are interested to connect with the veterans group already inside. Awesome.
Yeah.
There we go again. I think that some of the things that Justin and Matt have really keyed on is that, yes, you can have your employee resource group that does it, but it's really about that employee resource group creating those connections both within the company and outside. It's like it's a great opportunity. And so, yes, at Edison, we get that connection between the HR recruiting. And so, and that's why we have things, we have dedicated people in HR that are recruiting veterans. and talk, and Valor helps, create that bridge and also participates in those recruiting events, whether they take place offsite or on-site. We have an MOS translator on our career website. It's Edison Careers. So you can go in, type in your MOS, and it'll show you like what kind of jobs kind of fit those skills. We've done that. I think that's great. And then, yes, the community service, working with your community relations or your philanthropic angle, wherever that is, because so many of our customers are veterans as well, and they need advocated for, and they need services and products as well. And the other piece that I think is really interesting that we're able to do at Edison is we buy a lot of stuff. Okay, like we buy a lot of stuff. We have a lot of contractors, and so it's actually, I'm going to cheat and look. Jim knows this very well, but we do $2.2 billion in procurement, and 40% is with diverse businesses. And so there is a great opportunity here for in-state service disabled veterans. And so we're looking to grow that. We do provide a lot of contracts with that community. And that's great because then the Valor folks and our service folks can help with those in outreaching and getting more diverse businesses into our pipeline. It's just a great way to be an ecosystem. I will say for Valor, I'm really excited about kind of the chapter initiative that Matt has been talking about, and I know others do too. When you have a big service territory, how do you kind of create those veterans communities that are smaller? We have about 300 people across the service territory, but it's really hard to get all those people together. We have a lot of them centered in IT. And so that's a place, but our line workers are spread out all over the place. We used to, when we had a nuclear plant, we had a lot of Navy folks there in the nuclear plant. That was a good little cell, but now we're spread all over the service territory. And I'm kind of interested in, I'm going to take back this concept of maybe doing chapters, because it is really hard to get everybody together in such a big service territory.
Yeah, so great point there with some of these, and Jennifer, I think it's 300,000 is.
No, we have 300 veterans.
Okay.
We have 300 members in our, so it's similar. I mean, Matt, you said you've got about 300, right? But you guys are organized differently than us. I'm like that would be something interesting that I want to take back to our team is, in creating more leadership opportunities within Valor. Because I think that in the chapter level, you could create more leadership opportunities for the veterans. And I always find that veterans, we have leadership in the military at all levels. And so giving folks those opportunities within their civilian life is really important.
Yeah, so just a note here, so that we have big companies, right? And for veterans, these may be geographically distributed. So the Veterans Affinity Group can be both in the central heart or headquarters, but we're also talking about the hub and spokes when you have distributed teams and creating those chapters. And I think Justin has been able to do that at Emerson. So kind of seeing what they are, and they're different by company here, right? So we have different sizes and shapes. And I just emphasize, and before we go to Brad here, it's really what is created. It's not like it's just existing. It's what the company has created between its employees, its leadership, its culture, its desire, its skill sets, all these things combined. So no, it's not one size fits all in Veterans Energy, employee resource groups, and affinity groups. But Brad, what's you helped lead the Invenergy group. How does it look there?
And I would completely agree. I think Invenergy is probably the smallest company in this group of panelists. We have about 1,100 employees. I helped co-found the Veterans Network back in 2017, or towards the end of 2017. Kind of found a rhythm in 2018 and continue to really refine things in 19 and this year. Last year, we were recognized by the Honoring Investments in Recruiting and Employing the Hire medallion, which is the only federal level Veterans Employment Award. It recognizes companies or organizations that have a commitment to veteran hiring, retention, and professional development, which was a great sell for us. But out of that 1,100 employees, I would say it's about a 50-50 split between our corporate office and our field group, services organization. And I would say there's close to 20% of our services organization are veterans, and just shy of 11% kind of company-wide. just to give you a little bit more of the structure of the Veterans Network at Invenergy, I mean, we've built 3 main pillars, very similar to the other organizations here. The way that we've kind of bridged that gap, very similar to, I think, how Jennifer was mentioning it, is we use a veteran as the subcommittee lead for those pillars, but also we also have a business lead. Now, sometimes that business lead is a veteran as well, but they are also helping point or give direction with how the company is moving forward, but then the veterans give their perspective as well so that we can move forward in harmony. We're built on three of those pillars. In employee engagement, this is where we want to increase existing veteran engagement and retention, and develop internal leadership potential at the corporate level, as well as our host communities. I think we're a little bit more segregated on the field groups. I mean, we have like 50 different facilities across the nation, all with groups of people between 4 and 30 people. So it's a little bit harder for us to establish chapters, although that is a good concept to kind of bring back. A lot of our host communities and the veterans at our host communities, where we do have wind farms or solar farms or thermal natural gas plants, we do work with the veteran affiliated groups, so the VFWs, the American Legions. We try to organize events to help them out. On the recruiting side, that's another one of our pillars. We will look at military career fairs, visit bases to try and get into transition assistance programs. We've actually put somebody dedicated strictly to the military recruitment. So they're looking at MOS and rate translations, very similar to what Justin was saying. Being able to understand what your skill set is coming out of the military and how that translates to a civilian job is tough, and it's tough for employers too. So if we're able to kind of give a translation of that MOS or rate to a job description at our company, we might be able to gain a little bit more traction or attraction to that position. We'll also partner with companies like Airstreams or Hiring Our Heroes, and try to work through them. The last one being community outreach, very similar to every other organization here. We'll do volunteer events, whether that's at like a local Fisher House, at a VA hospital, United Relief Foundation, or like I said, in the host communities using the VFWs and the American Legions.
Awesome.
I don't know if you wanted to go into kind of like starting up that affinity group, or if you wanted to kind of go a different direction. But
yeah, so I'd like to hit 2 things in fairly quickly because I want to encourage attendees to kind of send questions, right? So what is, when I was a fellow in the Department of Energy, we were getting together for coffee, and then somebody said, hey, we need to do our official charter paperwork for the employee resource group. So just briefly, are there, some companies have organizations have official requirements to be an official affinity resource group? So maybe just comment briefly on that. And then just a comment is, it sounds like affinity groups, veterans affinity groups specifically, are like a network that touches each parts of the business, but also keeps the veteran, I don't want to say E4 mafia because I wasn't affiliated with that, but I heard about it. But it keeps a veterans mafia kind of like connected inside a company itself or organization. So, but briefly, are there actually requirements in your company to be an official affinity group of any form?
Yes, we do. We have we have a lot of employee resource groups. We have a large and diverse employee force. And so creating these kind of support networks and community relations and the recruiting piece is really important to us. So we do have a process. And I would say, if you are looking to start a veterans resource group, reach out to your other employee resource groups. Like ours work really well together. We have some that are just, that are at different levels. And so find the one that is modeled after where, the kind of engagement that you want. They'll help you out, right? And plus back then you got another network to work with. So, and we do actually within our HR department have specialists in our diversity and inclusion that actually help whoever wants, if we are starting an ERG, what that charter should look like, how to get an executive sponsor, what the structure should be, and then what your requirements are. So we have a very healthy employee resource group. Just process. And then also I would know there are national associations on employee resource groups. And so you are not on your own. If you don't have an employee resource group function, Brad's saying we got a small, we don't have like the years and years that Matt and I have, and even Justin, of a company that's been growing this. But there are, there are ERG groups. You can Google them, and there's a lot of coaching that's out there for you to start just an ERG, and then definitely reach out to your network, both inside and outside the company, to help you with your veteran specific one.
Jennifer, if I may just chime in, to your point, there's a fairly newly formed organization. It's a couple years old, called Veterans in Energy. And that's actually where I was first able to meet some of the folks from the Atlantic Council, because we kind of invited each other to that. But just a bit of a side note, and then I think there's a question, Mike, that we might be able to address in the Q&A. But Veterans in Energy actually stemmed from a program called Troops to Energy Jobs. And so generally speaking, Troops to Energy Jobs does address not only a national template for the employers on how to start programs and ERGs, but also provides many, many resources to the service members and veterans and families. But again, what was recognized by the industry is just what you were saying and what we were talking about on this panel. There needed to be a more national presence or a more national organization like Veterans in Energy to complement the Troops to Energy Jobs program, so that companies could better learn the best practices for having an ERG or an affinity group to support their ongoing efforts. So I just wanted to share that with the group.
Yeah, great point. And just a comment is the utility sector has been around for 100 years and has kind of developed these internal employee practices. Renewable energy companies, new companies of all sorts, the Teslas, the Sunruns have been around much less time, and so the young companies are still learning to develop these, but it's all based on spirit. And Justin, if you have something, we jump in briefly, and then we'll go to the question that has popped up.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of piggyback off of what Jennifer was saying, in that, I think there's a lot of resources if you do want to start an employee resource group. I think there's a lot of knowledge out there. Any of us can help with providing best practices or lessons learned. But, I think one thing to note is that there's not a right answer in how you do this, right? When I started the group at Emerson, a lot of it was just organic. We just said, well, we wanted to start a veterans group. The company recognized that there is a level of social responsibility around starting a veterans group, but then also that there was a lot of passion around the causes that we're supporting now. And, when we first started, it was very organic. We started with a very low bar, which was just, let's get all the veterans together. Let's just talk about some of the issues, get to meet each other. And then we started to talk about the chapter and the official, the doctrine behind, setting up an official ERG at Emerson. And, once we got that approved, everything was just, people just started coming out of the woodwork saying, how can I help? And you really just start by saying, what is right for my company, the type of work that we do, how we're structured organizationally, what is right to bring people in. And then you also take feedback from your group about what are the causes that they're passionate about. So for instance, we partner with Hiring Our Heroes as well. That's another organization that has been brought up. We do mentorship with American Corporate Partners is another group that we do. And we also volunteer with the USO in our local communities. So there's a lot of different ways to get connected. And there are countless more, trust me, that get brought up every day about how you can get connected. But the important thing is that I don't think there's a right answer in how you do it. I think it's just getting out and trying it. And then you'll be surprised at how much momentum it gains.
Well said. Well said. Based on, we have one question from Jared Smith that I'll read, and it kind of ties into more the overall wellness of the veterans community, and specifically within energy companies. What are the primary challenges you experience with veterans leaving active duty service? Is it health, mental, physical, emotional, or identity, as in without the rank or service connection or weapons platform they worked on, and perhaps financial challenges that maybe force them into taking a job that might not necessarily have wanted? Are there other things? So a much broader transition question, but Matt, you work in recruiting. Maybe you could comment a little bit about the actual transition, and then if other folks want to jump in. So a broad transition from active duty directly question as well. Matt, can you go ahead? Can you, we'll take you off mute, brother. Oh, he may have frozen up. We know he'll be back.
Look, I can start out with a response on this. I think one of the biggest challenges, at least that I've noticed, is it's just really knowing what you want to do, right? And I know that's an easy thing to say, but when you first get out of the military, there are a number of dimensions upon which you can take your career, right? And that's something that most people aren't used to, because we have a personnel office that gives us orders and where our duty station is going to be, right? And we have an MOS or an AFSC, as they call it in the Air Force. And so that's what you just focus on. They take all the decision making out of it. But when you come out of the military and you have 360 degrees of freedom, and where you take your career from a function standpoint, from a market or an industry or in market standpoint, or even geography and what you're hoping to look at, what you're hoping to accomplish from a personal level in terms of things like compensation and lifestyle and things like that. I mean, trying to put in the reflective work it takes to understand what it is that you want to do, I think, is one of the challenges that we face. And that's where I think the mentorship and the conversations help with people understand what are those dimensions that they can proceed around.
Yeah, and I'm back. If you all can hear me, I apologize for my intermittent connection. I appreciate Jared's question. I guess a couple angles that I would answer that is, as far as primary challenges that we might experience with veterans leaving the service as they're looking to come into the company. Of course, everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different. I think Justin might have alluded to that. Translation. Skills translation, I think, tends to be the biggest thing, at least from this, the employer's perspective. But one of the things that we try to do internally through our Veterans Resource Group to maybe address some of the components of Jared's questions, and Justin, I think you and some of the others have talked about this earlier on in this session, is we try to educate as best we can our employees and leaders on military culture, dispelling myths about the mental health and wellness of service members and veterans and families, to the point where we actually partner very closely with the state departments of Veteran Services or Affairs and have those representatives come in and provide what we've called a benefits briefing or some other similar dispelling myths session. So again, just to kind of wrap on both perspectives, not only do we try to educate our employees internally, and those are often led by or hosted by our Veterans Resource Group, but also that enhances our ability to engage the service members or veterans that are trying to join the company so that we're better informed on how to interact and then support them through their transition to our company.
So would it be safe to say that if you're transitioning and looking at an energy company, then the Veterans Employee Resource Group is probably your ally and your inside contact on the other side? I mean, it just seems to be the theme that's coming up. But anybody else want to weigh in on that transition piece?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take an additional, or I'll just add on to what Justin and Matt have said. I think that is really the key challenge is really that understanding of skills translation. I talk to veterans and current military transitioning service members all the time, whether they've been referred to me by a colleague or have seen me speak on a various panel relating to veterans or energy. There are a few nukes, some submarine officers, but not everybody. And I mean, you don't need to be an engineer to do this. The energy industry is a business just like any other industry. We have accounting, finance, project management, IT, cybersecurity, compliance. We have technical writers. You have a chemistry background. We need chemists in battery storage. Project developers are what you would consider to be kind of a jack of all trades. It combines business, engineering, and customer relationships. There's plenty to do without having to be like a Navy nuke or a generator mechanic in the military. In our control center, we've hired aviation or air traffic controllers, aviation mechanics, radio men. We do have some Navy nukes, but it's a broad spectrum. So I think that understanding that that you are a already made workforce coming out of the military with that work ethic and drive. The other stuff you can learn.
Awesome. Awesome. Justin, you want to go ahead if you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I wanted to reiterate your point about the employee resource groups being an ally in this process, because, I think, and anytime you make a transition like this, and we're talking about individuals' desires and what they want to get out of life and what they find fulfilling in terms of work, everybody's a little different, right? So, in my opinion, it's a very human process that you have to go through to understand what it is, the direction that you want to take your career. And I think that's where employee resource groups come in, because when you have those conversations, it helps people understand, should you go be a technical writer? Should you work in safety? Do you want to do project management? Is that fulfilling to you? What are the things that you think will be fulfilling? And then we can, the companies and organizations, I think, are generally willing to take risks if they understand that their investment in you is going to lead to a fulfilling career in your eyes. So, I think there are some practicalities you have to work through in terms of translating some of your experiences in the military and how they translate into the career that you want to. But I think if you are clear-minded around what it is that you want to do through these conversations with employee resource groups and veteran allies that are out there, I think that provides a lot of help to hiring managers understanding how you will fit within the company and how we can benefit each other.
Oh, great points. And something you said there, Justin, I've said before, also a veterans affinity group is the best retention mechanism for a company as well, because if you're happy, you will stay, or if you feel valued and you feel connected and you have quality work, people will stay. And if you stay, that company doesn't have to recruit someone else. So there's a little bit of not, in addition to the recruiting and the onboarding, but there's veterans community has had studies that have shown as high as 80% of veterans in their first year will leave their first job in their first year. So in terms of retention is also where, I even go as far as say the affinity group, and I'm a little bold with this, would be I'd offer it out there, and what would like to tack in a little different direction is a vibrant veterans affinity group is the best recruiting and retention mechanism a company can have for veterans. And it complements the HR folks as well. But and I encourage the audience, hey, send your questions. Jared asked a question, Jared got it answered. So fire away, and we'll keep them coming. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes left here, but.
Can I add just one more thing, Mike, to this conversation? And it's that, I don't know the perspectives of everybody that are out there, but at least when I got out of the service, I knew I didn't want to be a pilot anymore. So when we talk about translating your experience into a civilian career, I think it's important also to recognize that not all veterans want to do what they did in the service in a civilian career, right? So if you're Army infantry, that doesn't mean you want to go work in security, right? Or something like that. So I think that's where it's important to understand and have those conversations and not just assume that, I want to use these skills in a similar fashion in a civilian career, but instead have a conversation around, okay, what is it that you want to do? And then how do we take those experiences and fit them into what you want to do?
Awesome.
I got to give props to I got to give props to Justin on that, because I'll tell you, I mean, I'm a military police officer. I did not want to be a police officer anymore. And that was, I'm sure Justin had the same experience. You talk to a lot of people when you're doing your transition, and man, do they want it? They're just like, great. And particularly because I'm a female and I had military police, like, let's put you in the police. Let's put you in the, Secret Service. Let's put you in this. And I did not want to do that. And you've got to take control of your own destiny, even if that means admitting you don't know what you want to do. And I know Justin and I had an opportunity to talk about this in our pre-call. The other thing is it is being a little bit humble. I mean, I'll be really honest. It took me a long time to get back up to the level of responsibility and authority that I had in the military. It took me a long time. And but I will tell you, and at the time it was frustrating. And I think that's something that that are even our other, military members in our workforce, you'll see they've had the taste of leadership and being in charge of things and all of that, and they want it back. That can be really frustrating when I talk to service members. They're just like, why am I not being recognized for this? Why can't I get that job? Why am I not a manager? All of those things. Looking back, I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to learn in the subject matter area. I had a lot to learn about, doing different styles, such as appreciative inquiry was not was not something that I was really taught in the military. Appreciative inquiry as a manager and as a leader. So, all of those things, there is a training time, but do explore something that you are passionate about or you can be passionate about. You will pick up skills along the way. I do believe that you will get there, but you got to be patient.
Yeah, and I'm really happy you brought that up, Jennifer, because, when I was talking about Emerson's upcoming wave of retirements that we see coming on the horizon, right? We say 10 to 15 years potentially, right? But it's increasing on a yearly basis. But when we think of an individual retiring at the top of their career, that sends a ripple effect of succession planning that has to happen. And in order to get people ready to take over those senior leadership roles, it takes 10 to 15 years of experience in order to understand the technology, your end markets, your customers, organization, their purchasing processes, the legalese behind securing a purchase order, all the mechanics of business that come into play here. There's a lot to learn. And so, I think you have to be willing to Jennifer's point, you have to be humble and you have to be willing to take some of those roles that, you're going to get paid in experience, and trust that over time, your leadership perspective will accelerate your career in the organization.
Awesome. So we've had two questions come in. Because we only have about 4 minutes left, I'm going to ask them both. And I'm also going to ask the panelists to very tactically, very quickly just say the key onboarding programs we're using. We're hiring our heroes, whatever solar ready vets, whatever programs you tap into. So the two questions that I'll offer it up, and if you're able to quickly answer them, great. And if not, all the attendees, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can engage on the app, continued, and there is the entrepreneurship panel later today, as well as closing remarks tonight. So Zenon Arendovic's question, is there a workspace that assists in vetting and marketing new renewable technologies? Is there some sort of analyst position that bridges the business and technological aspects of clean energy? And then a question from Joanne McKenna. I agree totally with a veteran not wanting to do the same job they did in the military. What do you do to prevent typecasting from potential employers when they look at your resume? So feel free to take a quick stab at either, and then also hit any key points about your onboarding. And I'm going to play the heavy here on time, because we've only got about 2-3 minutes left. So let's get as much in as we can before we have to wrap up the panel.
Yeah, Mike, I'll step in on Zenon's question about a workspace for bridging that business to technology gap. I think that I know Invenergy and many other renewable energy companies, advanced energy companies have strategy teams, and those strategy teams are always looking at the different technologies that are coming out, the advancements that are coming out with those technologies, how those can play a part in the business and the energy infrastructure, how they can better the transmission grid, how they can help utilities, as well as the commercial and industrial partners that we partner with on these projects. So those types of companies, technology companies, renewable energy companies, clean energy companies, they typically have those strategy teams, but they also invest in their employees and innovating new ideas by eliciting kind of a crowdsourcing mentality. We call it our Innovators Challenge. And everybody submits ideas, and then the company invests dollars and resources to investigate those potential business applications.
I'm going to follow that up and actually toss it a little bit back to Mike. I know he's our moderator, but we work so closely with the labs and with the Department of Energy in our advanced technology group, which does test all of those. We do a tremendous amount of testing on battery storage, on grid technologies, but we work so closely with the labs. Mike, I know you're the moderator, but can you talk about the labs' role in this kind of new technology?
Yeah, very briefly, the Department of Energy has 17 national labs. 16 are operated as contractor operated. So the key part there is you will not find those jobs at USA Jobs. You would actually have to go to that individual lab, like Idaho National Lab's website. National Renewable Energy Laboratory. But they do a lot of independent third-party testing and evaluation for both small business and the government, and they develop technologies as well. There are also nonprofit and for-profit independent technology validators that provide the services to up to utilities and small companies, big and small. Feel free to reach out to me to connect more about it.
So, Mike, this is Matt. I'll jump in and try to maybe tackle a couple of the questions that are in the Q&A. One, the first job attrition rate, and then also, not wanting to do what you did in the military. I think maybe very broadly put, homework and research and planning and preparing as early on as the individual can do is so important. Maybe a couple tips are, if you don't know what a company does or what a job is, just start research and just Google energy companies, and then maybe start looking at their careers pages and open up the jobs and see how they describe the job. And that's one way to pull out some keywords to figure out and just keep pulling the string. What does this individual do? What part of the business is this person in? So again, just basic tips on research that can even apply to to those of us that are already in the industry. If you want to move around across different sectors, you might do the same thing. I used an example earlier this morning with another transitioning service member. Think back to when you're in elementary or middle school, and you might have gotten an assignment to do an interview, informational interview with a business professional. It's no different. Just be yourself and chat with these folks like they're a neighbor, but just ask questions. We're all very willing to share what we do. So, I wanted to give some of those basic kind of elementary tips, but the point is start early. And the last thing I'll say about the first job attrition rate, that's not a bad thing in my opinion, as long as it's part of your plan. So for example, if you know that is one of your options, that is okay. You can continue all of these tips that we might be sharing throughout this whole conference and still execute. And after that first job, just make it part of your experience and know that you still have your sights set on the grander career opportunity and company.
Awesome. So engage with people, do the coffee conversation, reach out to them, ask them, what is it you do? And initiate is probably, I don't say be aggressive, initiate is what I'll do there, close with. So we are over time, and I think we just got the juices flowing. So all of us are here on LinkedIn. I want to say thank you. So just to review, Atlantic Council, Veterans Advanced Energy Week, Day 4, Veteran Perspective. There's a lot of experience on this panel. It's not that often, this is once a year right now, but you get 4 veterans working in energy, involved in their affinity groups, also wearing their day jobs of various sorts, getting together to talk about these things. So thank you to the Atlantic Council. Thank you again, Matt, Military and Recruitment Program Coordinator, Dominion Energy, Justin, Corporate Strategic Planner and Chair of the Veterans Employee Resource Group at Emerson. Thank you, Jennifer, Principal Manager of External Engagement in Southern California, Edison. And thank you, Brad, Director of Services Business Development at Invenergy. A holistic opportunity to learn here. And thank you again, Atlantic Council. I'd say let's do it again. And, closing thoughts, veterans, just initiate outreach. We're all available. If you send a note on LinkedIn, always introduce yourself. Just don't send the blank request. And let's do good things. There's a huge opportunity, a huge mission, and some obviously good paying jobs here as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.